Urban sprawl in the modern era is associated with a number of negative environmental and public health threats. Air quality, deforestation, improper distribution of resources. Those are just some of the adverse effects of this mid-century phenomenon. Urban sprawl hasn't been without positive impact, though. It's contributed to cultural changes, creating new kinds of urban environments and unique architecture and character. Trevor Young's paintings seek to illustrate these new urban environments. Young's work often highlights the visual tension between natural and man-made light. His work celebrates the beauty and allure of Americana outposts, while at the same time explaining and highlighting the footprint of modernism.
I usually have an idea or a place that fascinates me, or a location. It often has a very interesting light to me. Often I'll take a photograph or do drawings, and I'll start establishing kind of a sense of geometry in the photograph or in the drawing, and then I'll transfer it over to a canvas, drawing it using straight edges and including perspective, but always hoping to have a kind of flatness and a sense of geometry over the illusion of perspective and the hyperness of perspective. I go through a process of, discovering this place in my painting that often isn't even how it is in real life. I kind of go into a fantasy of how I think amazing this place is. The core of sometimes making a painting is like, failure and messing up paintings and destroying them and coming back to them. And sometimes them resting in the studio for months and years, and before you're like, oh gosh, what a simple mistake. I can make this successful and interesting to myself. So I probably have like 25 paintings going at one time, and I'll hide one and forget about it, and then work on one that from 2 months ago that I had forgotten about then. So the figure takes away from sometimes the kind of sensitivity we can get from the environment, because however you say it, the portrait is still the most powerful element, I think, in art. I mean, it's a very well-painted portrait can be timeless. I mean, it's amazing how it can transcend through time and still create mystery from generations. I like to think that I bring some of that into my work, but who knows? That humanism, that isolation, that feeling and sensation that we get from looking at the loneliness of cement buildings and overpasses. I kind of think of the photography for me as an element of my drawing. So I work from it, and I print them out, and I reference them, especially for the drawing and some of the values. For the color, I kind of internalize and feel like the color can have a great sense of feeling in it, and I reach for that. I try to find that feeling that color can have, and through the goldenness of the yellows and the oranges that I always respond to, and from the modern lighting, and from even the beauty of fluorescent light and how it kind of vibrates on buildings and parking garages. It's funny, the parking garage is probably the most significant place for me, because when I started painting, I worked on location, and the fluorescent lights in parking garages were on 24 hours a day, and I could go there at night. But see, for years, I looked out of the parking garage. At some point I realized the glowing light in the parking garage was more exciting to me than and the precision of all the geometry and the long shapes and how the fluorescent lights were measured out. It was just so perfectly made and beautiful in my eye, and I was like, I want to show this. And I think that's how parking garages are to me. I love them. And I love the ones that have the fluorescent lights in them still, opposed to like the sodium lights, the blinding orange lights that can be quite beautiful, but the fluorescent light is still, to me, is the most exciting kind of light you can find in the world. It just pulsates. In a lot of my work, there's impediments in front of all the objects, like there's guardrails, and you kind of physically sit behind the guardrail, or like all the objects, you kind of don't get to go very far into them, but you look over objects. I kind of push that space and make it so you can't go in there and there, and I think that's what makes works memorable for me, is that the secret way that the eye moves through the painting and the shapes and the precision. My mother was a photographer, and I grew up around it, and I'm excited by it, and it's a delight. But I always feel like when I'm using a camera, I'm using a machine. It doesn't have the same kind of stimulation, and the challenges of solving problems. Painting is a challenge, and I find photography to be kind of unsatisfactory for myself. Like I'm never satisfied. Where the photographer ends, I begin, and I think that's where the life of the image is for me. It's about the surface and the touching and the decision making, and I think painting shows that process.
That's it for this week. Join the conversation with us on social media. We are CCTV America on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All of tonight's interviews can be found online at cctv-america.com. And let us know what you'd like us to take full frame next. Email us at fullframe@cctv-america.com. Until then, I'm Mike Walter in New York City. We'll see you next time.